I remember the exact moment when my world shifted. It wasn't dramatic like in those ancient tales where the skies split open or mountains crumble. Instead, it was a single word, so soft that had the grand hall not fallen into an absolute stunned silence, no one would have heard it. The royal palace always smelled of pine and smoke, a mixture that had once seemed comforting but now felt suffocating as I stood at the edges of the gathering. The monthly council meeting had drawn every pack leader from across the territories. Their expensive leather coats and heavy silver jewelry clinked and rustled as they jostled for positions closer to the throne. I remained where I always did, against the far wall, almost invisible as befitted my status. Being an Omega in the Alpha King's court was like being a ghost, visible enough to serve, invisible enough to be forgotten. The hierarchy had been this way since before written history, with Alphas at the top, Betas filling the ranks, and Omegas at the bottom. I had accepted this ordering of the world as I accepted the changing of seasons, inevitable and beyond my control. The heavy velvet curtains caught the afternoon light, casting the hall in a blood-red glow that made the silver throne gleam like something alive. Upon it sat King Reynard, his imposing figure draped in dark furs, despite the early spring warmth. His face, etched with the scars of countless challenges to his rule, remained impassive as he listened to territory disputes and hunting rights claims. At his side stood little Princess Eleanor, his 5-year-old daughter. Her pale blonde hair was braided elaborately, tiny flowers woven through the strands, making her look like a woodland sprite among the harsh, battle-ready figures surrounding her. Her blue eyes, so like her father's, scanned the room with an intelligence that belied her years. Eleanor had never spoken a word, not one. The court physicians had examined her thoroughly when she turned 2 and still remained silent. The healers from every territory had been summoned, offering remedies and potions that did nothing. Some whispered it was a curse from the old spirits, punishment for her mother's death during childbirth. Others said it was a blessing. A princess who could keep secrets was a valuable asset. I knew better than most the weight of silence. My mother had given me a silver locket before she died, pressing it into my palm with trembling fingers. "Sometimes, Elise," she'd whispered, "silence is a shield, but remember that words, when finally spoken, can reshape worlds." I wore that locket still, hidden beneath my simple serving clothes. A reminder that even in servitude, something of me remained wholly mine. The king raised his hand, silencing a particularly heated argument between the northern and eastern pack leaders. The gesture was small but absolute. Power radiated from him in waves that even I, standing far from the throne, could feel prickling against my skin. "Enough," he said, his voice deceptively soft. "The hunting grounds beyond the Silver River will remain neutral territory. Any pack found claiming exclusive rights will answer directly to me." No one argued. No one ever did. Not to his face. I shifted slightly, my foot brushing against the stone floor. It was enough to draw Eleanor's attention. Her eyes locked with mine across the vast space, and something in my chest tightened. I had been assigned to attend to the princess's chambers for the past year, changing her bedding, laying out her clothes, lighting her fires. We had developed a silent understanding, this mute child and I. I could read the slight furrow of her brow when she was displeased, the barely there quirk of her lips when something amused her. The meeting droned on, reports of strange scents at the borders, rumors of rogue wolves who acknowledged no pack laws. Through it all, Eleanor kept glancing at me. There was something urgent in her expression that I couldn't decipher. Then came the moment. The Western pack leader was presenting his daughter, a young alpha female of marriageable age, obviously hoping to forge an alliance with the king. The girl stood proudly beside her father, chin high, her dark hair falling in elegant waves down her back. She wore the traditional ceremonial dress of potential mates, deep red fabric embroidered with silver threads that caught the light. "My daughter would bring strength to your line, your majesty," the Western leader said smoothly. "Her bloodline is pure alpha for 12 generations." The court murmured appreciatively. Bloodlines were everything in our world. The purer your alpha heritage, the more power you commanded. Which was precisely why Omegas like me were relegated to the shadows. King Renard studied the young woman with cold calculation. "She seems strong," he acknowledged. "Though I have yet to decide if I will take another mate." The room fell silent. The king had not taken a mate since his wife's death, though not for lack of offers. Some said grief kept him alone. Others whispered that he feared the same fate would befall another queen. Children were rare among our kind, and births often dangerous. It was during this tense silence that Eleanor suddenly squirmed free of her attendant's grip. She darted across the polished floor, her small feet making barely a sound. The court watched, bemused, as she ran, not to her father, not to the potential new queen, but straight toward me. My heart jumped into my throat. Had I done something wrong? Was I standing incorrectly? I glanced around, wondering if perhaps she was running to someone near me, but there was no one. Eleanor stopped directly before me, her tiny face tilted up to mine. Her blue eyes were wide, insistent. She grabbed the fabric of my simple gray dress with one small hand. "Princess," I whispered, breaking protocol by speaking without being spoken to first. "What is it?" The room had gone completely still. Even the king leaned forward on his throne, watching his daughter's unusual behavior with narrowed eyes. Eleanor raised her free hand and pointed directly at my face. Her lips parted, and for a moment, I thought she was simply breathing heavily from her sprint across the hall. Then it happened. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice like the rustle of leaves, so soft yet so clear in the silent hall that the words seemed to echo. The world stopped. My blood turned to ice in my veins. Around us, gasps rippled through the court. Someone dropped a metal goblet, and it clanged against the stone floor, rolling in a wide arc before settling. The king rose to his feet so quickly that his heavy fur cloak slipped from his shoulders. "What did she say?" he demanded, his voice thunder in the stunned silence. Eleanor turned to face her father, still clutching my dress. She pointed at me again, her small finger unwavering. "Mommy," she repeated, louder this time, with the confidence of someone who had broken through an impossible barrier and found something worth fighting for on the other side. I couldn't breathe. To be singled out by the princess was dangerous enough. To be called mother by her was tantamount to claiming royal status. Or worse, implying that the king had taken an Omega as a lover. Either suggestion could get me killed. "Your Majesty," I began, my voice shaking. "I don't know why." "Silence," he barked, descending the dais steps with predatory grace. Each footfall echoed like a death knell. The crowd parted for him, their faces a mixture of shock, disgust, and morbid fascination. No one intervened. No one would dare. When he reached us, Eleanor showed no fear of her father. She simply stared up at him with those intelligent blue eyes, still holding my dress as though anchoring herself to me. "Explain this," the king demanded, his voice deceptively quiet. But how could I explain something I didn't understand? I had never encouraged the princess to see me as anything other than a servant. I had always maintained proper distance, proper respect. "I cannot, Your Majesty," I whispered, lowering my eyes as was expected. "I have only ever served the princess as commanded." He studied me with the intensity of a predator assessing prey. I could feel the weight of his gaze like a physical touch, searching for deception. "Take the princess to her chambers," he finally ordered one of her regular attendants, a stern beta woman who rushed forward to collect Eleanor. But the child would not let go of my dress. When the attendant tried to pry her fingers away, Eleanor did something no one expected. She growled. It was a tiny sound, almost comical coming from such a small child, but it carried the unmistakable authority of royal blood. The king's eyebrows shot up. Then, to my horror, he laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh, but one filled with dark amusement and something else I couldn't identify. "It seems my daughter has made her preference clear," he said, his voice carrying throughout the hall. "Omega, you will accompany the princess to her chambers. The rest of you are dismissed." The court hesitated, clearly wanting to witness more of the drama unfolding, but a single sharp look from the king sent them filing out. The Western pack leader and his daughter lingered the longest, their faces twin masks of outrage and humiliation before they too departed. As I followed the attendant who carried a now silent Eleanor toward her chambers, I could feel the king's eyes burning into my back. The locket against my skin seemed suddenly heavier, my mother's words echoing in my mind. Words, when finally spoken, can reshape worlds. Indeed, a single word had just reshaped mine. But into what, I didn't yet know. The real question, the one that chilled me to my core as I climbed the winding stairs to the royal family's private wing, was why. Why, after years of silence, had Princess Eleanor chosen to speak her first word to me? And why, of all the words in our language, had she chosen that one? I had a terrible feeling I would soon find out, and that the answer would either save me or destroy me completely. The princess's chambers were warmer than the rest of the castle, with fires kept burning day and night to ward off the chill that seemed to seep from the ancient stones. As I entered behind the beta attendant, the familiar scent of lavender and beeswax enveloped me. I had spent countless hours in these rooms, tidying toys, straightening bed covers, and silently going about the business of serving without being seen. Now, everything felt different. Eleanor squirmed in the beta woman's arms until she was set down, then immediately ran to me, wrapping her small arms around my legs and looking up with an expression of such trust that my throat tightened painfully. "This is highly irregular," the beta attendant, Matilda, said, her lips pinched with disapproval. "The king will sort this out, I'm certain." The unspoken implication hung in the air. An Omega had no place in the affections of a royal child. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Matilda sniffed dismissively before turning on her heel and leaving, though I knew she would position herself just outside the door, both guard and spy. When we were alone, I knelt to Eleanor's level, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. "Princess," I whispered, glancing nervously at the door. "Why did you call me that? Do you know what you've done?" She blinked at me with those solemn blue eyes, then reached out to touch my face with small, cool fingers. "Mommy," she said again, the word forming with careful precision, as though she had been practicing it silently for years. "No, little one," I said gently. "I'm Elise. I take care of your rooms, remember? I'm not your mother. Your mother—" I trailed off, uncertain how to speak of the dead queen to her child. Eleanor shook her head stubbornly, a familiar gesture I had seen countless times when she refused a particular dress or food. She reached into the pocket of her small ceremonial gown and pulled out something that made my blood freeze. A tarnished silver coin with a hole drilled through it, hanging from a thin leather cord. My free hand flew to my throat, feeling for my locket through the fabric of my dress. It was still there, its familiar weight reassuring against my skin. But the coin Eleanor held, it was identical to one my mother had kept, a twin to the one that had been buried with her. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. Eleanor pointed to a loose stone near the fireplace, one I had never noticed despite my thorough cleaning of the room. Then she did something even more surprising. She pulled me by the hand toward her small writing desk, where parchment and charcoal sticks were laid out. The court had been teaching her to write, hoping it might compensate for her lack of speech. With deliberate care, she drew a circle, then added rays around it, a crude but recognizable sun. Beside it, she drew a crescent moon. Then between them, a small figure that I understood was meant to be herself. "I don't understand," I admitted. Her face scrunched in concentration, and she added another figure next to the moon, taller than the first. She pointed to this figure, then to me. Next, she added a third figure next to the sun, larger than the others, and pointed toward the door, toward where her father would be. A cold realization began to dawn on me. Impossible but insistent, the sun and moon were ancient symbols in our culture, representing the duality of our nature, human and wolf, civilization and wilderness. But they were also the sigils of the two great royal bloodlines. The sun for the Alpha King's line, the moon for the Queen's family, long thought to be extinct except for the diluted bloodline that had married into the royal family generations ago. My mother had never spoken of her past, had forbidden me to ask questions. "The past brings only pain," she had told me once when I was young enough to still be curious. "Look forward, never back." But she had given me the locket, and apparently, she had given Eleanor's mother the coin. "This isn't possible," I murmured, more to myself than to the child watching me intently. A sharp knock at the door made us both jump. Eleanor hastily shoved the coin back into her pocket just as the heavy oak door swung open to reveal King Reynard himself. He had dispensed with his formal council attire and wore only a simple black tunic and trousers, though the heavy silver crown still rested upon his dark hair. Despite the less formal clothing, he looked no less dangerous. "Leave us," he commanded Matilda, who had slipped in behind him. "But, Your Majesty, protocol dictates out." The single word held such finality that Matilda backed away, closing the door behind her. I rose quickly to my feet and lowered my eyes, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain he could hear it. Eleanor, however, showed no such deference. She stepped slightly in front of me, her tiny body positioned almost protectively. The king observed this with narrowed eyes, then moved further into the room, his presence seeming to shrink the space. He sat in a chair near the fire, never taking his eyes from us. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a smaller chair opposite his. I hesitated, then perched on the edge of the seat, keeping Eleanor close to me. To sit in the king's presence was itself an honor rarely afforded to one of my status. To be commanded to do so, in a private audience, was unprecedented. "You're afraid?" he observed, his voice neutral. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Good. Fear sharpens the mind, and I need yours sharp right now." He leaned forward slightly. "My daughter has never spoken, not one word, not to me, not to her nurses, not to the healers who have examined her. Yet today, she not only spoke, but chose to speak to you. Why? I don't know, Your Majesty." His eyes flickered with annoyance. "You attend her chambers daily?" "Yes, Your Majesty. For the past year. And in that time, has she ever communicated with you in any way?" I thought of the small gestures, the looks of approval or displeasure, the silent communication that had developed between us. Nothing worth mentioning, nothing that would explain today's events. "Only in the way of children who cannot speak, Your Majesty. Gestures, expressions." He nodded slowly, as though this confirmed something. "And you have never encouraged familiarity? Never suggested that she might view you as anything other than a servant?" "Never, Your Majesty. I would not presume." He studied me with those piercing blue eyes, so like his daughter's, searching for deception. I forced myself to meet his gaze, knowing that to look away would suggest guilt. "What is your name?" The question startled me. I had served in his household for 3 years, yet he had never asked my name. Why would he? Omegas were interchangeable, useful tools rather than individuals. "Elise, Your Majesty, and your family?" My throat tightened. "Gone, Your Majesty. My mother died 5 winters ago. There was no one else." "Your mother's name?" "Lyneth." I spoke it carefully, the name feeling strange on my tongue after so long unspoken. Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. Where was she from? The Eastern Territories, originally. She never spoke much of her past. Eleanor, who had been watching this exchange with unnerving focus, suddenly reached for a piece of parchment from her desk. She drew rapidly, then held up her drawing for her father to see. Another crude sun and moon, with figures standing beneath. The king's face went completely still. "Where did she learn those symbols?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "I don't know, Your Majesty. I've never taught them to her." Eleanor huffed in frustration, then pointed at the moon and at me, then at the sun and at him. Finally, she pointed at herself, positioned between the 2 symbols. A muscle twitched in the king's jaw. "Leave us," he said suddenly. I stood, relieved to be dismissed, hoping I might escape with my life after this strange encounter. "Not you," he clarified. "Eleanor, go with Matilda. She's waiting outside. I need to speak with Elise alone." For a moment, I thought the child would refuse. Her small face set in stubborn lines. But then she nodded, gave me one last, long look, and walked to the door with the dignity of someone far older. The king watched her go with an expression I couldn't read, pride mingled with something darker. When the door closed behind her, he turned back to me. "I'll ask you once more, and your life depends on your honesty. Why did my daughter call you mother? I truly don't know, Your Majesty." He rose suddenly, closing the distance between us in 2 long strides. I flinched but held my ground. He reached out and I braced for a blow. But instead, his fingers went to my throat, finding the chain of my locket through the fabric. "What is this?" I swallowed hard. "A keepsake from my mother. His fingers slid along the chain until he found the locket itself. He pulled it out from beneath my dress, studying the tarnished silver with an unreadable expression. "Open it." With trembling fingers, I did as commanded. Inside was a tiny scrap of parchment, yellowed with age, bearing a symbol drawn in faded ink, a crescent moon with a small star nestled in its curve. The king stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at me, his eyes burning with an intensity that made me want to step back, but there was nowhere to go. I was trapped between his imposing figure and the wall. "The queen had a coin," he said quietly. "Silver, ancient, with the same symbol. She wore it always, hidden. When she died, it disappeared." I said nothing, afraid that any word might be the wrong one. "There is a prophecy," he continued, his voice taking on a distant quality, as though reciting something long memorized. "The last daughter of the moon will bear a child who bridges two worlds. The child will not speak until she recognizes her true path." A shiver ran through me. Our people had many prophecies, ancient words passed down through generations, most of them obscure and open to interpretation. But this one seemed terribly specific, given the day's events. "I don't understand what this has to do with me," I whispered. His eyes refocused on my face, studying it with uncomfortable intensity. "My wife was the last known descendant of the Moon dynasty, a bloodline thought nearly extinct. Her family claimed only distant relation, but on our wedding night, she showed me the coin and told me the truth. The Moon dynasty was not gone, merely hidden." He released the locket, letting it fall back against my skin. "You have her eyes," he said softly. "Not the color. Hers were green, like summer leaves. But the shape, the way they see too much. I didn't notice until today. How could I have missed it?" "Missed what, Your Majesty?" My voice was barely audible. "When my wife was dying, she made me promise to protect her child and to find her sister. I searched for years but found no trace. The sister had vanished with her young daughter just before my wife came to court. My mind reeled with implications I didn't want to face. My mother brought me to the Western Territories when I was very young. We lived quietly, keeping to ourselves. After she died, I came here seeking work. What was her true name?" he demanded suddenly. "Not the one she used here, but the one she was born with." I hesitated, then remembered my mother's final words to me. "When the time comes, remember your blood. Remember who you truly are." "Linnea," I whispered. Her name was Linnea of the House of Selene. The king closed his eyes briefly, as though in pain. When he opened them again, there was a terrible certainty in their depths. The queen's sister was named Linnea. She disappeared 25 years ago, taking with her the secret of the Moon dynasty's survival. "That's not possible," I said, fear making me forget protocol. "My mother was an Omega, like me." His laugh was short and without humor. "No, she wasn't. Neither was my wife, though they both played the part convincingly. The women of the Moon dynasty have always had the ability to mask their true nature. It was how they survived when the Sun dynasty, my ancestors, hunted them nearly to extinction." I shook my head, unwilling to believe what he was suggesting. "I'm an Omega. I've always been an Omega. Have you?" he asked softly. "Or have you simply never questioned what you were told to be?" Before I could respond, shouts erupted from somewhere in the castle, followed by the distant sound of running feet. The king's head snapped up, his body instantly alert. "Stay here," he commanded, already moving toward the door. "Lock it behind me and open it for no one but me or Eleanor." "What's happening?" He paused, hand on the door. "Something I've feared for years. It seems we've been discovered." As he pulled the door open, I glimpsed guards running past, weapons drawn. The scent of fear and aggression flooded the air. "Remember," he said, fixing me with one last penetrating look, "no matter what you hear, no matter who comes, you open this door only for me or my daughter. Understand?" I nodded, fear closing my throat. "Good. You may not believe what I've told you, but Eleanor knows the truth. She's always known. That's why she chose today to speak, because she sensed the danger coming." With that cryptic statement, he was gone. I locked the door as instructed and backed away from it, my mind spinning with revelations I couldn't begin to process. If what the king said was true, then everything I believed about myself was a lie. And if Eleanor had truly recognized me as family, then we were all in grave danger. I clutched my locket, my mother's final gift, and wondered what other secrets she had taken to her grave, and what price we would all pay for them. The minutes crawled by like hours as I paced the confines of the princess's chambers. Outside, the commotion had grown. Shouts, the clash of weapons, and once, a howl that made the hair on my arms stand on end. Something terrible was happening in the castle. And I was trapped, useless, with nothing but questions that multiplied with each passing moment. I moved to the window, careful to stay to the side rather than present a clear target. From this vantage point high in the eastern tower, I could see the main courtyard. Figures darted across it, guards with drawn swords, servants fleeing, and wolves. Actual wolves. Not our kind in shifted form, but real beasts with matted fur and wild eyes, somehow inside the castle walls. My breath caught as I spotted a tall figure in a black cloak directing the wolves with subtle hand gestures. His hood fell back for just a moment, revealing bone-white hair and a face marked with ritual scars. A tamer. The forbidden practitioners who could bend the will of true wolves were supposed to have been eradicated generations ago, their dark arts outlawed under penalty of death. Yet here, one stood, brazenly attacking the Alpha King's stronghold. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. This couldn't be coincidence, not on the very day Eleanor had broken her silence, not on the day I had learned impossible truths about my heritage. The locket seemed to burn against my skin. I pulled it out, opening it again to stare at the crescent moon symbol. If what the king said was true, this wasn't just a keepsake, but a legacy, a secret my mother had carried to protect me. A soft click from the direction of the fireplace made me whirl around. The loose stone Eleanor had pointed to earlier was moving, sliding inward and then to the side to reveal a small, dark opening. A passage. I held my breath, expecting danger, only to exhale in relief when Eleanor herself crawled through, her dress dirty but her expression determined. "Princess, where have you been?" I rushed to her, kneeling to check her for injuries. She took my hand and tugged insistently toward the passage. "Safe," she said, her voice clearer now with practice. "Come, we need to wait for your father," I protested, remembering his instructions. He said to open the door only for him or you. She shook her head emphatically. "Father fighting. We hide." I stared at her, astonished not only at the sudden expansion of her vocabulary, but at the adult-like certainty in her tone. This was no ordinary child, regardless of her age. A crash from somewhere below made us both jump. The attack was moving higher in the castle. "Where does this passage lead?" I asked, peering into the darkness beyond the opening. Eleanor pointed downward. "Under, out." She pulled something from her pocket, a small glass vial filled with glowing blue liquid. It cast enough light to illuminate a few feet of the narrow stone passage. "From Matilda," she explained. "For emergency." I hesitated only a moment longer. The king had ordered me to stay, but that was before he knew the extent of the attack. Eleanor clearly believed we were in danger, and her instincts had proven uncannily accurate so far. "All right," I decided. "But stay close to me." She nodded solemnly and crawled back into the passage. I followed, pulling the stone closed behind us as best I could. The passage was tight but navigable if I stayed on my hands and knees. Eleanor, being smaller, could almost walk hunched over. She led the way with confidence, the blue light casting eerie shadows on the rough stone walls. The passage twisted and descended through the heart of the castle. In some places, small gaps in the masonry allowed glimpses into rooms and corridors. The throne room, now empty save for overturned furniture. A hallway where 2 guards lay motionless. The kitchens, abandoned with food still cooking over fires. "How did you know about this place?" I whispered as we continued downward. "Dreams," Eleanor replied simply, "and father showed once, for danger." The king had prepared escape routes for his daughter. Of course he had. The man I had glimpsed today, beneath the cold monarch, was nothing if not strategic. After what felt like hours, but was likely only 20 minutes, the passage leveled out. The air grew damper, carrying the scent of the river that flowed beside the castle. Eleanor stopped before what appeared to be a dead end, then pressed her small hand against a particular stone. Nothing happened. She frowned, then looked at me expectantly. "What is it?" "You try," she said, pointing at my hand, then the stone. Understanding dawned. If these passages were built by the Moon Dynasty, as seemed likely given everything I had learned today, then perhaps they would respond to blood. To me, I pressed my palm where Eleanor had indicated, and immediately felt a subtle shift as the stone warmed beneath my touch. The wall slid away, revealing a small chamber containing a simple wooden boat tethered at the edge of an underground stream. "Clever," I breathed. The castle had been built at the confluence of two rivers, and legend spoke of water passages beneath it, though I had always assumed them to be myths. Eleanor climbed confidently into the boat. I followed more hesitantly, never having been fond of water. Once we were both settled, the rope tethering us untied itself, more old magic, and the current began to carry us away from the castle. The blue light from Eleanor's vial was our only illumination as we drifted through the darkness. The passage widened until we were moving through what felt like a vast cavern. The ceiling lost to darkness above us, the sound of water dripping creating an eerie melody. "Where are we going?" I asked, keeping my voice low despite the fact that we were surely far from any pursuers by now. "Circle stones," Eleanor replied. "Safe place. Mother's people. Mother's people." The words sent a shiver through me. Did she mean my mother or hers? Were they truly sisters, as the king had claimed? And if so, what did that make Eleanor and me? "Princess," I began carefully, "why did you call me Mommy in the throne room today?" Her brow furrowed in concentration. "Not Princess," she corrected. "Eleanor." "Eleanor," I amended. "Why did you call me that?" She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. Then, "Dreams told. You protect me." Like she touched her chest. "Feel same. Family. But I'm not your mother," I said gently. "Your mother died when you were born." She nodded solemnly. "Queen died. But you..." She struggled for words, her newfound voice still limited. "Same blood, same duty." She pointed to my locket. "Moon Women Guard. Always." The cryptic words sent another chill through me. Before I could ask anything further, the boat bumped gently against stone. We had reached some kind of underground dock, crude but serviceable. Eleanor climbed out immediately, waiting for me to follow. A narrow path led upward from the dock, winding through more stone passages until we finally emerged into the open air. I blinked in the fading daylight, disoriented after the darkness of the tunnels. We stood in a small clearing surrounded by ancient forest, with no sign of civilization in any direction. At the center of the clearing stood a circle of weathered stone monoliths, each carved with symbols I recognized from my mother's rare teachings. The old language, she had called it. The tongue of our ancestors. "Where are we?" I breathed, turning slowly to take in our surroundings. "Sacred place," Eleanor said, walking toward the circle. "Wait here." I remained at the edge of the clearing as she approached the largest of the stone monoliths. She placed her small hand against it and spoke words I couldn't understand. Words in the old language, flowing and musical. Nothing happened for several heartbeats. Then, a faint glow appeared beneath her palm, spreading until it outlined symbols carved into the stone. A wind picked up, circling us, carrying whispers just below the threshold of comprehension. The hairs on the back of my neck rose as I sensed we were no longer alone, though I could see no one else in the clearing. Eleanor turned back to me, her face solemn. "They come," she said simply. "Who comes?" I asked, fighting the urge to flee back into the tunnel. "Guardians, moon women, like us." Before I could question her further, movement at the edge of the clearing caught my eye. A woman emerged from between the trees, then another, and another, until a dozen stood in a loose semicircle watching us. They wore simple gray dresses like mine, but each had a silver circlet on her brow and carried a staff topped with a crescent moon symbol. Their ages varied widely, from a girl barely older than me to a woman whose face was lined with decades of experience. One stepped forward, a tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes the exact shade of green the king had described his wife as having. "Eleanor," she greeted the child with a nod. Then her gaze shifted to me, and something like pain flashed across her features. "And Elise, Linnea's daughter. We have waited a long time for your return." I stared at her, speechless. The woman knew me, knew my mother. "Who are you?" I finally managed. "I am Celine, first guardian of the Moon Circle. I was advisor to your aunt, the Queen, before she left to marry the Alpha King." Her expression softened slightly. "And I was friend to your mother, before she fled to protect you." "Protect me from what?" Celine's eyes darkened. "From those who would destroy the last of the Moon bloodline. The same ones who attack the castle now, seeking the child." She nodded toward Eleanor, who had come to stand beside me, her small hand slipping into mine. "The Tamer," I said, remembering the white-haired man in the courtyard. "I saw him." Selena nodded grimly. "Silas. Once he was one of us, a guardian, before ambition corrupted him. He believes that by eliminating the Moon Dynasty and controlling the Alpha King's line, he can unite both powers in himself. But why now? Why today? Because today the prophecy began to fulfill itself. When Eleanor recognized you and spoke, it sent ripples through the old magic. Silas would have felt it, known that the time had come." I looked down at Eleanor, who watched the exchange with that unnerving adult understanding in her eyes. "She called me Mommy, as she should," Celine said simply. "In our tradition, when the mother of a royal child dies, her closest blood female relative becomes the child's mother in all ways that matter. You are Eleanor's rightful guardian by blood and by oath, though you never knew to make that oath." My head spun with implications. "But I'm just an Omega. I can't protect anyone." Celine's laugh was soft but without humor. "You are no more Omega than I am. The women of the Moon Dynasty can mask their true nature, appear as whatever rank serves them best. Your mother taught you to suppress your true self so thoroughly you never questioned it. Then what am I? You are what Eleanor recognized, a moon woman of the royal line, an alpha in your own right, though of a different kind than the Sun Dynasty. And you are now the only thing standing between Eleanor and those who would use her power for darkness." As if summoned by her words, a howl sounded from the forest, too close and too wild to be one of our kind. The guardians tensed, raising their staffs in unison. "They've found us sooner than expected," Celine said sharply. "Elise, you must take Eleanor to the sanctuary. We will hold them here." "I don't know where." "She knows," Celine interrupted, nodding at Eleanor. "Trust her. She has been preparing for this her whole life." Eleanor tugged at my hand, pulling me toward the far side of the stone circle. I hesitated, looking back at Celine. "What about the king? He'll be looking for her." "If he lives, he will find you," she replied grimly. "Now go." Another howl, closer still, decided me. I scooped Eleanor into my arms and ran in the direction she pointed, leaving the guardians to face whatever approached. As we reached the edge of the clearing, I glanced back to see the women forming a circle, their staffs raised as an eerie blue light, the same color as the liquid in Eleanor's vial, began to emanate from the tips. Then we were in the forest, running through gathering shadows as the day faded into twilight, pursued by howls and the distant sound of conflict. Eleanor clung to me with surprising strength, her face buried against my shoulder. "It will be all right," I whispered, not believing it myself. "I'll protect you." She lifted her head just enough to meet my eyes. "No, you will," she said with absolute certainty. "Mother." The word echoed through me like a vow, sealing a destiny I had never imagined. Whatever came next, whatever truths awaited us, I knew one thing with sudden, bone-deep conviction. I would give my life to keep this child safe. Not because of prophecy or bloodlines or ancient magic, but because when she looked at me with those knowing blue eyes, something in me recognized her too. Family, blood, duty, love. Block 4. The forest grew denser as we fled, ancient trees with gnarled roots that seemed to reach for us in the growing darkness. Eleanor directed our path with gestures and occasional whispered words, guiding us unerringly through terrain that would have quickly left me lost on my own. The sounds of pursuit faded, then ceased altogether, though I dared not slow our pace. "How much further?" I gasped, my arms aching from carrying her. Though small for her age, Eleanor was still a solid weight against my chest. "Down," she replied, pointing to what appeared to be nothing more than a tangle of roots and undergrowth ahead. "Hidden." I set her down carefully, and she immediately began pushing aside vines to reveal a narrow opening in the earth, a natural crevice between two massive boulders. It would be a tight fit for me, but Eleanor slipped through easily, the blue glow of her vial illuminating a short tunnel beyond. Taking a deep breath to quell my instinctive fear of such enclosed spaces, I squeezed through the opening. The tunnel widened after a few feet, allowing me to stand hunched over. Eleanor waited patiently, her small face solemn in the ethereal light. "Good," she said approvingly when I joined her. "Follow now." The tunnel descended at a gentle slope, clearly shaped by both nature and deliberate hands over many years. Roots formed natural steps where the decline grew steeper, and in some places, crude symbols had been carved into the earthen walls. Protection sigils, I realized, recognizing a few from my mother's teachings. "Eleanor," I ventured as we continued downward, "how do you know all this? These places, these passages?" She considered for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Dreams show," Mother whispers. "Always knew." The cryptic answer raised more questions than it answered, but I sensed now was not the time to press. After what felt like hours but was likely only 20 minutes, the tunnel opened into a small, circular chamber. Unlike the rough passage, this space had been carefully shaped, its walls smooth and reinforced with wooden beams etched with more sigils. A few simple furnishings occupied the space: a low table, 2 sleeping pallets, a shelf containing dried herbs and several leather-bound books. "Sanctuary," Eleanor said, gesturing around the chamber. "Safe here." I ran my fingers over the nearest sigil, feeling a faint vibration beneath my touch. "Protection magic," I murmured. My mother had taught me little of the old ways, claiming they were dangerous in a world ruled by the Sun Dynasty, but I recognized the fundamental patterns. "How long has this place been here?" "Always," Eleanor replied simply, moving to the shelf and selecting a small cloth pouch. She offered it to me. "For strength." Inside were dried berries that I recognized as moonwort, a rare plant said to enhance the natural abilities of moon women. My mother had shown me the plant once, explaining that it grew only in places touched by old magic. "Thank you," I said, taking a single berry and placing it on my tongue. The taste was bitter, then sweet, spreading warmth through my body. I offered the pouch back to Eleanor, but she shook her head. "For you," she insisted. "Need strength now." As if her words had triggered it, exhaustion crashed over me, the day's events and revelations finally catching up now that we had reached relative safety. I sank down onto one of the pallets, my limbs suddenly leaden. Eleanor busied herself lighting a small oil lamp, then brought me a wooden cup filled with water from a covered jug in the corner. She watched me drink with that unnervingly adult gaze, then sat beside me, her small shoulders squared with determination. "Questions," she said. "You have many." Despite everything, I laughed softly. "Yes, more than I know how to ask." She nodded seriously. "Try," I answer. I considered where to begin, what was most important to understand in this moment. "The king said your mother, the queen, was from the Moon Dynasty, that my mother was her sister." Eleanor nodded. "True." "Which would make us cousins," she supplied. "Family." I took another sip of water, trying to organize my thoughts. But if that's true, why was I raised as an Omega? Why did my mother hide who we really were? Eleanor's face grew sad. "Danger. Always danger for moon women. Sun King killed many, long ago. Only few escaped. The ancient conflict between the Sun and Moon dynasties was the stuff of legend, though the official histories taught that the moon line had been extinguished centuries ago, their dangerous magic purged from our world. Clearly those histories had been written by the victors. But the current king, your father, he married a moon woman. He must not hate them as his ancestors did." "Father different," Eleanor agreed. "Saw beyond old hate. Wanted peace." Her expression darkened. "Others did not. Silas, I guessed, the tamer." She nodded grimly. Wants all power, no sharing. She struggled for words, her newfound voice still limited when expressing complex thoughts. Moon women balance, sun men power, together harmony, alone. She made a gesture of explosion with her small hands. I was beginning to understand. The old legends spoke of balance, the sun and moon in equilibrium, neither dominating the other, but when the Sun dynasty overthrew their counterparts, that balance was lost, leading to centuries of increasingly authoritarian rule. And the prophecy the king mentioned? About the last daughter of the moon bearing a child who bridges two worlds. Eleanor touched her chest. Me. Bridge two powers. She pointed at me. You guard until ready. Ready for what? Her eyes, so like her father's yet somehow older, met mine steadily. To change everything. The enormity of what she was suggesting, what all of this meant, threatened to overwhelm me. I was no guardian, no protector. Until this morning, I had been a simple Omega servant, invisible and unimportant. Except I wasn't. I never had been. How do I access this power everyone says I have? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't feel any different. Eleanor considered, then pointed to my locket. Opens more than metal, she said cryptically. Must want. Must believe. I touched the silver locket, trying to feel beyond its physical form, to connect with whatever magic it supposedly contained. Nothing happened. I don't know how, I admitted. She didn't seem concerned. Will come. When needed most. She yawned suddenly, her small body finally showing the strain of the day's events. Rest now. Safe here. Though I doubted my ability to sleep with so many questions churning in my mind, I nodded and settled back on the pallet, arranging my body so Eleanor could curl against me. She did so without hesitation, her complete trust in me both touching and terrifying. What if I couldn't protect her? What if all of this, the prophecy, the legacy, the magic, was real, and I failed? Despite my racing thoughts, exhaustion soon pulled me under, into dreams filled with moons and wolves and a voice that sounded like my mother's, whispering words I couldn't quite grasp. I woke to Eleanor shaking my shoulder, her expression urgent. Someone comes, she whispered. Instantly alert, I sat up and listened. At first, I heard nothing beyond our own breathing. Then, a subtle shifting of earth from the tunnel, the faint scent of pine and smoke. Get behind me, I whispered, positioning myself between Eleanor and the tunnel entrance. The scent grew stronger, and with it came recognition. Pine and smoke, the scent that had always pervaded the royal palace. The king's scent. Sure enough, moments later, King Reynard himself emerged from the tunnel, having to bend nearly double to fit his tall frame through the passage. He was barely recognizable as the imposing monarch I had served for years. His fine clothes were torn and stained with what could only be blood, some of it clearly his own from a deep gash across his left shoulder. His face was streaked with dirt and ash, his silver crown nowhere to be seen. "Father!" Eleanor cried, darting around me before I could stop her. She threw her small arms around his legs, her earlier solemnity forgotten in the relief of seeing him alive. The king's stern face softened as he placed a gentle hand on his daughter's head. "Eleanor, you're safe." His eyes lifted to mine, filled with questions. "Both of you." "The guardians showed us the way here," I explained, rising to my feet, but keeping a cautious distance. King or not, cousin by marriage or not, this man had been the embodiment of absolute power and terror for most of my life. They stayed to fight. A shadow crossed his face. There will be no more fighting at the stone circle. Silas made sure of that. My heart sank. The guardians? Some escaped. Most did not. His voice was flat, with the particular exhaustion of one who has seen too much death in too short a time. The castle is lost as well for now. Silas holds it with his tamers and their beasts. Eleanor released her father and returned to my side, her expression once again grave beyond her years. "How find us?" she asked him. A grim smile touched his lips. "I knew of this place. Your mother showed me before." He trailed off, his gaze distant for a moment. "I didn't know if you would remember the way, but I hoped." Not me, Eleanor said, taking my hand. She knew. She pointed at me. The king's penetrating gaze returned to me, assessing. The moon blood runs strong in you, it seems. Stronger than I realized. I straightened my spine, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. So I've been told, though I still don't understand most of it. Understanding will come. He lowered himself onto the second pallet with barely concealed pain, the wound on his shoulder clearly taking its toll. For now, knowing your heritage exists is enough. The rest can be learned. And what happens now? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Silas has your castle, your power. The Guardians are dead or scattered. We're hiding in a hole in the ground. How exactly does any of this help Eleanor fulfill whatever prophecy everyone keeps talking about? Instead of anger at my impertinence, the king's face showed something like approval. You speak like a moon woman, he observed, direct, questioning. My wife was the same. I speak like someone who has had her entire identity upended in a single day and is now apparently responsible for the safety of a child who may or may not be destined to change the world, I replied. I think I'm entitled to some confusion. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the point. We regroup. We gather what allies remain, and then we take back what is ours. His eyes, so like Eleanor's, blazed with conviction. Silas believes he has won, but he doesn't understand what he truly faces. And what is that? The prophecy isn't just about Eleanor, the king said quietly. It's about the union of sun and moon, the restoration of balance that was destroyed centuries ago. My marriage to the queen was the first step. Eleanor is the second, and you... His gaze intensified. You are the third. Me? I'm nothing special. You are the last adult female of the royal moon bloodline, the keeper of their secrets, whether you know them yet or not, and... He hesitated, then continued with obvious reluctance. According to the full prophecy, which few now living know, the child of two worlds must be guided by the shadow of the moon until she can unite what was broken. The shadow of the moon, I repeated. What does that mean? It means the Moon Dynasty's protector, the one who walks in darkness to guard the light. He nodded toward my locket, the keeper of the crescent. Eleanor tugged at my hand, drawing my attention. Her solemn eyes held mine as she spoke with careful precision. Need you. Cannot do alone. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me like a physical force. How could I be what they needed? I was still struggling to accept that I wasn't the person I had believed myself to be for 23 years. Yet as I looked at Eleanor's trusting face, at the desperate hope barely concealed beneath the king's stoic exterior, something stirred within me. A sense of purpose, of rightness. The feeling that perhaps my life hadn't been a lie after all, but a preparation. My mother's final words echoed once more. Remember your blood. Remember who you truly are. I don't know if I can be what you need, I said finally, but I will try. For Eleanor. For my mother. For the balance that was lost. The king nodded gravely, a hint of relief softening his features. That is all anyone can ask. He shifted, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his wound. We should rest while we can. Tomorrow, we begin to rebuild. Eleanor settled between us, her small body radiating a calm certainty that belied the chaos of our situation. As she drifted into sleep, her hand still clasped in mine, I studied the king's face in the dim light. You knew who I was, I said softly, not to wake Eleanor. When I first came to the castle, you must have suspected. He met my gaze steadily. I wondered. You bear a striking resemblance to your mother, and through her, to my wife. But I couldn't be certain. The women of the Moon Dynasty are adept at concealment, even from those who know what to look for. Why didn't you say anything? Because certainty would have put you in danger. Better to let you remain invisible, a simple servant, until the time was right. His expression grew distant. I didn't expect that time to come so soon. When Eleanor spoke to me, he nodded. When she recognized what I only suspected, his eyes returned to my face, searching. You truly had no idea, did you? None, I confirmed. My mother told me almost nothing of our past. Only that we needed to hide, to be invisible. She was protecting you the only way she knew how. He glanced down at his sleeping daughter. As we all try to protect what matters most. In that moment, I glimpsed the man beneath the monarch, a father willing to risk everything for his child. Perhaps we weren't so different after all. Block 5. Dawn brought no light to our underground sanctuary, but I sensed the changing of the day nonetheless. A subtle shift in energy that my newfound awareness seemed attuned to. Eleanor woke with the same knowledge, her eyes opening in the dim lamplight with immediate clarity. The king had barely slept, his watchful presence a constant throughout the night. "We must move soon," he said without preamble, when he saw we were both awake. "This place, while secure, is too close to the stone circle. Silas will eventually track us here. Where can we go?" I asked, helping Eleanor fold the thin blankets that had covered us during the night. "If the castle is taken and the guardians scattered." "West," he replied, his voice certain. "To the mountains where the oldest moon temples still stand. There are those who remain loyal to both dynasties there, living in secret for generations." Eleanor nodded as though this confirmed something she already knew. "Mother's maps," she said, tapping her temple. "In here." I had given up being surprised by the child's knowledge. Whatever connection she had to her dead mother's memories, it had kept us alive so far. The king rose, testing his wounded shoulder with a grimace. I noticed he had bound it during the night with strips torn from his own shirt, but blood still seeped through the makeshift bandage. "Your wound needs proper tending," I said, moving closer to examine it. He waved away my concern. "It will hold until we reach safety." "It will fester if not cleaned," I countered, surprising myself with my boldness. "My mother was a healer. I know enough to help, if you'll allow it." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Very well." I searched the small sanctuary and found a clay pot of salve on the shelf beside the books. It scent sharp and medicinal when I removed the lid. "This will help," I said, recognizing the blend of herbs my mother had often prepared. "But I need to clean the wound first." With reluctant compliance, the king removed what remained of his shirt, revealing the full extent of the injury, a deep slash from shoulder to mid-chest, clearly made by claws rather than a blade. I used water from the jug and a clean section of my underskirt to wash away the dried blood, working with gentle efficiency despite my lack of experience treating wounds this severe. "How did this happen?" I asked, partly to distract him from the pain, partly because I needed to understand what we faced. "Silas has developed new techniques for controlling the beasts," he replied, his jaw tight. "They move with unnatural coordination, attacking in patterns no wild creature would devise. And they're stronger, faster than normal wolves. He's done something to them, some corruption of the old magic." I applied the salve carefully, noting how the angry redness around the wound began to fade almost immediately. The old ways still held power, it seemed. And the people at the castle, the servants, the guards. His expression darkened. Many died in the initial attack. Those who survived are either prisoners or fled into the surrounding forests. He met my eyes directly. "Your concern for them does you credit." I finished binding the wound with fresh strips of cloth, then stepped back. They were my friends, my companions for years, the only family I had after my mother died. "And now?" he asked, watching me carefully. I glanced at Eleanor, who had been observing our exchange with solemn attention. "Now I have new family, it seems, and new responsibilities." "Indeed." He donned the remains of his shirt, then retrieved a small leather satchel from beside the tunnel entrance, something he must have carried with him during his escape. From it, he withdrew a folded map and a dagger in a simple sheath, which he offered to me. "You should be armed. The journey ahead won't be easy." The weapon felt foreign in my hand, its weight both a burden and a promise. "I've never fought before. Let us hope you won't need to," he said grimly. "But if the time comes, remember that you fight not just with steel, but with what flows in your veins." Eleanor approached, touching the dagger's hilt with curious fingers. "Moonblade," she said approvingly. "Good for you." I studied the weapon more closely and noticed subtle engravings along the hilt, crescent moons and stars, the symbols of my apparent heritage. "It's beautiful," I admitted. It was your aunt's, the Queen's, the king said quietly. I've carried it since her death, waiting for the right time to pass it on. I think that time is now. The revelation sent a shiver through me. The blade had belonged to Eleanor's mother, my own blood relative whom I had never known. I secured it at my waist with shaking hands, feeling the weight of legacy as much as metal. We gathered what supplies the sanctuary offered: dried fruit and meat, a water skin, the healing salve, and Eleanor's glowing vial, which the king examined with raised eyebrows. Moonfire, he said, clearly impressed. Rare and powerful. The guardians must have trusted you greatly to provide this. Eleanor smiled, a flash of childish pride breaking through her grave demeanor. Matilda gave. Said I would need. The name startled me. Matilda? The beta attendant? The king's lips curved in a rare smile. Matilda has served the Moon dynasty in secret for decades. She was placed in the castle when my wife arrived to protect her, and later, to protect Eleanor. Another layer of deception revealed. How many more secrets would this day uncover? I wondered how many people in my former life had known more about me than I knew about myself. With our meager provisions secured, we prepared to leave the sanctuary. The king went first, his large frame barely fitting through the tunnel, followed by Eleanor. I came last, casting one final glance at the small space that had sheltered us through the night. The forest above was washed in the gold of early morning, dew sparkling on leaves and grass. We emerged cautiously, the king scenting the air for any trace of pursuit. Finding none immediate, he oriented himself using the position of the sun, then pointed west. We follow the river for the first day, he explained in a low voice. It will cover our scent and lead us toward the mountain passes. Once there, we'll need Eleanor's knowledge to find the hidden paths. Eleanor nodded confidently, slipping her small hand into mine as we began our journey. The king took the lead, moving with the silent grace of a predator despite his injury. I followed with Eleanor, my senses more alert than I could ever remember them being, catching scents and sounds that would have escaped me just days ago. As we walked, the reality of our situation settled over me like a weight. We were 3 fugitives, a deposed king, a prophesied child, and a woman only beginning to discover her true nature, fleeing from an enemy who controlled not only the seat of power, but dark magic we barely understood. The odds seemed impossibly stacked against us, yet there was something else growing alongside the fear, something I had never truly felt before. Purpose. My entire life had been spent in the shadows, accepting the limitations placed upon me by a society that valued hierarchy above all else. Now, those limitations had been revealed as lies, and in their place stood a truth both terrifying and exhilarating. I was not who I had believed myself to be. I was more. We paused at midday near a small stream that fed into the larger river, drinking deeply and resting in the dappled shade of an ancient oak. Eleanor explored nearby, collecting interesting stones and leaves with the innocent curiosity of the child she sometimes remembered to be. The king watched her with a mixture of pride and concern. She trusts you completely, he observed quietly. I've never seen her form such an immediate bond with anyone. She recognized something in me that I didn't know existed, I replied, watching the child arrange her treasures in careful patterns on a flat stone. Something I'm still struggling to understand. The blood knows, he said simply. Even when the mind does not. I touched the locket at my throat, feeling its familiar contours. And what happens if we succeed? If we defeat Silas and restore you to the throne? Does Eleanor's prophecy mean the return of the Moon dynasty alongside the sun? He considered this, his gaze distant. I believe it means something far more profound, the end of seeing them as separate at all. Sun and moon, Alpha and Omega, ruler and ruled. The old divisions have brought only suffering. Balance, I murmured, remembering Eleanor's explanation. Yes. His eyes returned to mine, surprisingly gentle. My wife believed our daughter would unite what centuries of conflict had torn apart, but she needs protection until she's ready. She needs you, Elise, hearing my name spoken by the king, not as a command to a servant, but as an acknowledgement between equals, stirred something deep within me. The last pieces of my old identity fell away, replaced by a new understanding of who I was meant to be. Eleanor returned to us, her small hands cupped around something. She opened them to reveal a perfect moonflower blossom, its white petals luminous even in the daylight. "For you," she said, offering it to me. "New beginning." I accepted the delicate flower, twining its stem into my braid where it nestled against my pale hair. "Thank you." She smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed her solemn face. "Welcome home, Mother." The word no longer startled me. I understood now what she had known from the beginning, that family was not always about birth, but about recognition, about seeing and being seen truly. The child had recognized the guardian in me before I knew it existed. She had spoken her first word, not in error, but in prophecy. As we continued our journey westward, toward mountains that promised both refuge and revelation, I felt a strength growing inside me, a power that had nothing to do with hierarchy or status. It was older, deeper, the strength of women who had protected their own through centuries of darkness, who had preserved their light by walking in shadow. I was Eleanor's guardian, her mother in all the ways that mattered. I was the last daughter of the Moon Dynasty, keeper of its legacy. And I would ensure that the child who had spoken her first word to me would live to speak the words that would heal our broken world. The path ahead was fraught with danger, the outcome uncertain. But for the first time in my life, I walked forward not as a shadow but as myself, fully awakened to the light within.